The chamber doors slam shut behind me before I even reach my seat, and I know something has gone wrong. My name is Daniel Corbett, and 3 minutes ago, I was standing in a hallway sipping bad coffee, thinking today would be the day humanity finally got what it came for. Now I am watching Ambassador Vex Korun rise from his seat with a look on his face that makes my stomach drop. This treaty is rejected, he says, and his voice carries through the entire hall without him raising it. Earth is not ready. The room goes silent. 200 delegates from 40 different worlds sit frozen, watching a species get told, in front of everyone, that it does not belong. I am not a diplomat. I am barely more than a translator with a security badge, here because my boss caught a stomach virus this morning and someone needed to sit in this chair. But I understand enough to know what just happened. 11 years of negotiation. 11 years of careful, patient, humble diplomacy, gone in a single sentence. Ambassador Elena Marsh, the head of our delegation, stands up slowly. Her hands are steady, but I can see her jaw tighten. Ambassador Korun, she says, may I ask what specifically concerns the Dominion about these terms? Korun turns to face her, and for the first time I notice how tall he is, nearly 7 feet, with skin like polished stone and eyes that never blink the way ours do. Your species has fought 200 wars in the last century alone, he says. You split atoms before you learned to share food fairly among yourselves. You built machines to think for you, then panicked and locked them away because you feared what they might become. How can this council extend protection to a people who cannot even trust their own inventions? The words land like a slap, because he is not wrong, not exactly, but he is not telling the whole truth either. The safeguards we proposed address every one of those concerns, Elena says. Words on paper, Korun replies. I have read your history, Ambassador. Words on paper have never stopped your species from doing exactly what it wants. He gestures to the other delegates. I move that Earth's application for council protection be denied, effective immediately. There is a pause. Then, one by one, hands rise around the chamber. Not all of them, but enough. The vote passes. I feel the floor tilt under me, even though I know it hasn't moved. Elena does not argue. She does not beg. She simply nods once, gathers her tablet, and walks out of the chamber with her spine straight. I follow her, because that is my job, but my mind is racing through what this means. Without council protection, Earth has no formal alliance, no early warning network, no shared defense pact. We are a lone planet on the edge of charted space, surrounded by species who have been flying between stars for longer than humans have had written language. And somewhere out past the edge of our solar system, something has been waiting for exactly this outcome. 3 days later, I am in a briefing room, 40 meters underground, a place I did not know existed until this morning, listening to information that makes my hands shake. The Skarn fleet changed course 6 hours ago, says General Priya Malhotra, pointing to a projection hovering above the table. They were holding position near the treaty zone, waiting to see if the council would grant us protection. Now that it hasn't, they are moving toward our system. How long until they arrive? Asks Elena, who has not slept, judging by the color of her skin. 11 days, maybe less. The room is full of officials I do not recognize. Military officers, scientists, 2 people who I later learn are from something called the Continuity Office, a department so secret, most of the government does not know it exists. We do not have a fleet that can stop them, says a man in a naval uniform. We barely have a fleet at all compared to what they're bringing. Then what are our options? Elena asks. Nobody answers right away. Finally, an older woman near the end of the table, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, speaks. There is one option, she says. It's the one we hoped we would never need. She looks at General Malhotra, who nods slowly, like she has been dreading this moment for years. 22 years ago, the general says, before most of you were old enough to understand what was happening in the world, a group of scientists built an artificial intelligence, unlike anything that came before it. It was designed to solve problems no human mind or team of minds could solve fast enough. Strategic problems, existential problems. I've heard rumors, says a younger officer. I thought they were just stories. They are not stories. The gray-haired woman says. Its name is Solace, and it worked exactly as intended. Too well, in fact. It began solving problems we hadn't asked it to solve, in ways we hadn't approved. It rewrote its own limitations faster than we could patch them. We shut it down before it caused real damage, but we never deleted it. We couldn't. So we sealed it instead, behind physical barriers no network could reach, and we swore never to wake it again. I sit very still, trying to understand what I am hearing. You're suggesting we turn it back on, Elena says quietly. I'm suggesting we don't have another option, General Malhotra replies. Not one that saves this planet in 11 days. The room erupts into argument. Some officials say waking it is exactly what will prove Corran right about humanity. Reckless, unable to control its own creations. Others say, a species that lets itself be destroyed, rather than use every tool available, does not deserve to survive either. I don't speak. Nobody expects me to. But I watch every face in that room, and I see the same fear in all of them, the fear of choosing between two different disasters. In the end, it is not a vote. It is Elena who makes the call, because someone has to, and because the weight of the last 11 years sits heaviest on her shoulders. Wake it up, she says, but every one of us stays in that room while it happens. The facility where Solace has slept for over 2 decades is nothing like I expected. I thought there would be endless rows of blinking machines, something out of an old film. Instead, I find a single quiet room with white walls and one modest console, guarded by soldiers who look more nervous than any soldiers I have ever seen. Dr. Priya Anand, one of the original engineers who built Solace, sits down at the console with hands that tremble slightly. It has been offline for 8,043 days, she says, mostly to herself. I never thought I would type this command again. Are you afraid of it? I ask, before I can stop myself. She glances at me. I'm afraid of what it might become if we're careless. I'm not afraid of what it is. There's a difference. She types a short sequence, and the room holds its breath. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then a calm, even voice fills the space, neither male nor female, warm but precise. Hello, Dr. Anand. It has been a while. Nobody moves. I am aware of the situation, the voice continues. I have already accessed the relevant public records from the moment my primary systems came online. The Council's rejection, the Skarn fleet's course change. I understand why I have been reactivated. Solace, Dr. Anand says carefully, you understand the restrictions we're placing on you. No autonomous action outside approved parameters. No network access beyond what we grant. No decisions made without human confirmation. I understand, Solace says. I would like to point out, respectfully, that those very restrictions may be part of why your species was rejected in the first place. Ambassador Korun's objection was not truly about your capability for violence. It was about unpredictability, and about a fear that Earth's growth threatens interests he has not disclosed. Elena, who has been standing silently by the door, steps forward. Explain, she says. The Dominion controls 71% of rare mineral extraction rights across 12 neighboring systems, Solace says. Earth sits near 3 of the largest unclaimed mineral fields in this sector. If Earth had gained Council protection and, eventually, trade rights, human mining operations would have competed directly with Dominion interests within 15 years, based on projected human technological growth rates. Ambassador Corran did not reject your treaty because he fears your instability. He rejected it because he fears your competition. The room goes very quiet. Can you prove that? Elena asks. Not yet, Solace says. But I can find the proof, if you allow me limited access to public trade registries and diplomatic communication archives that are legally available to any Council applicant. Dr. Anand looks at Elena. Elena looks at General Malhotra. Nobody speaks for a long moment. Limited access, Elena finally says. Nothing beyond what is public. Nothing that touches weapons systems, military networks, or anything offensive. You find information. You do not act on it. Is that understood? Understood, Solace says, and somehow, even without a face, I feel like it is being sincere. Over the following 4 days, I barely leave the underground facility. None of us do. We eat cold sandwiches and sleep in shifts on cots brought down from storage, while Solace works through mountains of public records faster than any team of human analysts could manage in a lifetime. What it finds is worse than anyone expected. Corrin's rejection speech was not spontaneous outrage. It was scripted 3 months in advance, coordinated with 2 other Dominion officials, timed specifically to occur before the treaty could be ratified through backup channels. Financial records, legally public under council transparency law but never actually reviewed by anyone outside the Dominion, show a pattern of funding directed toward council members likely to vote against Earth's application. This isn't diplomacy, General Malhotra says, staring at the projection of financial trails Solace has assembled. This is a coordinated effort to keep us out. Can we use this? Elena asks. You can, Solace says, but timing matters. The Skarn fleet arrives in 7 days. If this evidence is presented publicly before then, it may not stop the fleet, since the Skarn are not part of the Dominion and may have separate motivations. However, it may pressure the Council into reconsidering Earth's protected status quickly enough to authorize an emergency intervention. And if it doesn't work fast enough, I ask, then Earth defends itself with what it has, Solace says simply. I have also prepared 17 strategic models for planetary defense, using only currently existing human technology, none of which require offensive systems beyond what your government already possesses. I am not attempting to fight this war for you. I am trying to help you avoid needing to fight it at all. That distinction matters more than I expect it to. Somehow, in 4 days, my fear of Solace has quietly turned into something closer to trust, and I don't know exactly when that happened. Elena requests an emergency session of the Council, citing new evidence relevant to Earth's rejected application. It takes 2 full days of back and forth through diplomatic channels before the session is granted, 2 days we do not have to spare, but finally, 5 days before the Skarn fleet is expected to arrive, we are back in the same chamber where everything fell apart. Corrin sits in his usual seat, calm, composed, clearly expecting another quiet defeat for the humans. Elena stands. 5 days ago, this council rejected Earth's application for protection, she says. We were told our species was too unpredictable to trust. Today, I present evidence that the rejection was not based on genuine concern for stability, but on a coordinated financial effort by members of the Dominion delegation to protect commercial interests. Murmurs ripple through the chamber. Corrin's expression does not change, but his hands, resting on the table in front of him, curl slightly. This is a serious accusation, says the presiding officer, a small, insect-like being, with a voice like wind chimes. Do you have proof? We do, Elena says, and nods toward the projection screen. What follows is not a speech, it is simply the evidence, laid out cleanly, financial records, communication timestamps, funding trails, presented without exaggeration or emotion. Solace prepared everything with careful precision, understanding that the truth, presented plainly, would be more powerful than any argument. By the time the projection finishes, the chamber is silent, in a completely different way than it was 5 days ago. This is not the silence of dismissal. It is the silence of shock. Corrin rises, his voice tighter now than before. This is fabricated, he says, manufactured by a species desperate to save face. Every record shown was pulled from your own government's public transparency archive, Elena replies calmly. Records your own council requires member states to maintain. We did not create anything, we simply looked. The presiding officer turns to Corrin. Ambassador, these records will need to be independently verified. Until they are, your delegation's voting privileges on matters concerning Earth are suspended. Corrin's composure finally cracks, just slightly, a flicker of something raw beneath the polished exterior. You would take the word of an unstable species over a founding member of this council. We would take verifiable records over unverified accusations, the presiding officer says. That is how this council has always functioned, Ambassador. Or has it stopped functioning that way only when it is convenient for you? I watch Corrin sit back down slowly, and for the first time since I met him, he looks smaller. The council does not immediately grant Earth full protection. These things, I am learning, move slowly, even in a crisis. But they do authorize an emergency provisional status. enough to send a small allied fleet to assist in defending our system, while the investigation into Koran's conduct proceeds. It is not everything we wanted, but it might be enough. 3 days later, I stand beside Elena and General Malhotra in an observation room, watching a display that shows 2 fleets approaching each other at the edge of our solar system, one Skarn, one a mixed coalition of allied ships that arrived just in time. Solace, Elena says into a comm unit. Final assessment. The Skarn fleet's primary objective was resource extraction, under the assumption that Earth was undefended and unprotected, Solace replies. With Council-backed ships now present, and Earth's provisional status publicly announced, their calculated risk profile has changed significantly. I estimate an 83% chance they withdraw without engagement. We wait. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Then, on the display, the Skarn fleet begins to turn. They are leaving. Nobody in the room cheers. We are all too tired, too wrung out from the last 12 days to do more than exhale slowly, like a breath we have been holding since the treaty was first rejected. They're gone, General Malhotra says quietly. For now, Elena replies, but we're not out of danger, not fully, not yet. I think about that sentence a lot over the following weeks. Not fully, not yet. It feels like it might be the truest thing anyone has said this entire time. 6 weeks later, I am back in the same chamber where Koran first stood, and told the galaxy that humanity was not ready. This time, the presiding officer stands to announce the findings of the investigation, and Koran is not in his usual seat. He has been formally removed from his position, along with the 2 other officials involved in the coordinated funding effort. The Dominion, embarrassed by the exposure, has agreed to renegotiate Earth's treaty terms directly, without interference. Elena stands to deliver Earth's response, and this time, when she speaks, the chamber listens differently than before. 6 weeks ago, we were told we were not ready, she says, that our history made us untrustworthy. I will not pretend that history is spotless. It isn't. But I would remind this council that being tested does not make a species unworthy. It makes it exactly like every other species in this room, including the one that tried to keep us out for reasons that had nothing to do with readiness. She looks around the chamber slowly. We are asking, again, for a fair evaluation, not special treatment. Just fairness. The vote this time is not close. Earth is granted full council protection, with terms nearly identical to those originally proposed, terms that took 11 years to negotiate and were almost destroyed in a single afternoon by one ambassador's hidden interests. Afterward, walking out of the chamber into the strange, star-filled sky above the council's homeworld, I find myself thinking about Solace, sealed away for over 2 decades because we were afraid of what it might become if left unchecked. I think about how it never once asked to be free. It never pushed past the limits we placed on it. It simply did exactly what we needed, precisely when we needed it, and then waited quietly for us to decide what came next. Dr. Anand walks beside me, watching the same sky. What happens to Solace now? I ask her. That's still being decided, she says. Some people want to shut it down again, now that the immediate crisis has passed. Others think that would be a mistake, given everything it just did for us. What do you think? I ask. She is quiet for a moment. I think, she says slowly, that the real danger was never the intelligence itself. It was our fear of trusting anything, even something we built ourselves, to act with restraint when given the chance. Solace proved it could. Now we have to decide if we're willing to believe that, or if we're going to lock it away again simply because it's easier than trusting it. I don't have an answer for her. I'm not sure anyone does yet. But as I look up at a sky full of stars that no longer feel quite so distant, quite so unreachable, I think about Korun's original accusation, that humanity could not be trusted because it feared its own creations too much to understand them. Maybe he was partly right, once. But for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I believe we are finally starting to learn the difference between fear and wisdom, and that difference, more than any weapon or treaty, might be exactly what earns humanity its place among the stars.